What is the worst travesty ever? I'm going to establish that in this video. I'm gonna make a case of what I think is the worst travesty ever. The worst miscarriage of justice. The worst persecution ever. Now, if you think something like historical witch hunts, you wouldn't be far off. Or if you say the Holocaust or any kind of genocide, then you can say that yes, there's an element of a hate crime in that makes it worse than just persecuting a person at random or for no reason. But there is one thing that stands out, and that is worse than anything currently considered a hate crime or any of those historical examples. And I'm going to show you what that is. But first I'm going to quote Bruce Rind for evidence. I mean, it should be obvious without that, but I'm just gonna put some quote out here now and read that just to establish the context, okay? And so this is the paper that I'm going to be citing today. Bruce Rind's study, which was published in 2022. This is very new. This is not his infamous work, but a new one which is even better. And sadly, it hasn't gotten much attention outside of my movement. Of course, it was celebrated in the men's movement and in the MAP movement. But I haven't seen this reported in the mainstream news, which it should be. So it seems they just, instead of denouncing the truth, they just ignore it now. But I don't ignore it. I'm going to bring attention to it. And I am so glad that he has really said a lot about the female sex offender charade. In his words, like, I couldn't have said it better myself. This is a godsend for me. It's the same things I've been trying to say for 20 years that, puts into a very good scientific paper here. Now, as for girls with older men, it's different. We have to admit that. But it's also more nuanced, and the paper is really a vindication of that as well, though to a lesser extent. You can read here in the abstract that in minor or older sex, partner age difference mattered for girls but not boys. But I'll talk a little bit about the girls, but it's beyond the scope of this video to really go into that. I am going to focus on the witch hunt against women who are nice to boys. And this paper proves so very eloquently that the women are in fact being nice to the boys. They're not abusing them. So let us now look at first a quote about not really this topic, but rather delinquency, because there is a myth that youth who have early sex are more likely to be delinquent. This is something I might even have believed myself before reading this, not because I believed in causation, but because I believed that delinquent boys had more opportunities to have sex. But it's not even true as a correlation, because when you look at this twin study that Ryan is mentioning here, he finds that within twin pairs, the twin delaying first sex had the greater likelihood of later delinquency. In other words, they concluded earlier sex had a protective effect when taking into account a fuller range of relevant controls. So early sex makes you well adapted. And that's just common sense too when you think about it. I mean, when I was young, when I was a youth, I didn't have sex. I wasn't delinquent outwardly, but I was dead inside. And I would most definitely have been well adapted if I had sex. In fact, that would probably have prevented later true delinquency, because my delinquency came later, in fact, in my 30s, when I became an enemy of the state. And became an activist. Now, if I had had sex all along, from, say, age 12 or something, then I would have been too happy to become an activist, I think. Because you have to be a misfit to care or to sacrifice so much as I did when I became an enemy of the state in order to take the side of sexuality. So ironically, it takes one who didn't get a lot of sex to really become an advocate for sexuality. Because well-adapted people don't tend to question the norms too much. They just enjoy life, right? Okay, moving on. We're now gonna look at the first really beautiful formulation of why sex is great for boys with the older women. And I'm gonna read. Anderson and Beeler, 1990, reviewed the sexual behavior of immature males, that is commonly late juvenile, early adolescent, across non-human primate species, concluding that sexual interactions between adult females and immature males is universal. In species after species, primatologists conducting the primary studies have noted the eagerness and initiative by which immature males commonly attempt coitus with adult females, which they have attributed to immature males' need to learn copulation effectively in service of later reproductive success. This attribution stems from greater knowledge of primate social development and how sexual practice may fit into it for males. For example, immature males deprived of social and sexual experience during development later evidence sexual incompetency, which does not apply to juvenile females, pointing to an essential need for early sexual experience. Gunst et al. Formally examined this needing to learn hypothesis in sexual behavior by observing a troop of Japanese makakis. As predicted from other behaviors, which increase gradually during development, leading to adult competency later on, they found the same pattern in immature males' sexual mounting behaviors. From later juvenescence onwards, these males incrementally increased mounting behavior, but mostly and preferentially directed at adult females. This special targeting was efficient, it was argued, in that it provided immature males with the kind of sexual practice most useful to maximizing later reproductive success. In short, the non-human primate data suggest functionality for immature male-adult female sexual interactions across the primate order, a functionality that appears to be reflected in proximal mechanisms such as immature males taking the initiative and exhibiting eagerness, implying that the behavior is appetitive for them. Because boys are primates too, it can be speculated that maturing boys may likewise be biologically prepared, as a conserved adaptive trait, to find sex with nubile women appetitive, prompting initiatory behavior, context permitting, and a clear eagerness. The Finnish, Kinsey, and other data reviewed previously support this speculation. Yes, of course it does, and so does common sense. I mean, I feel stupid for having to reach for a scientific paper for this, because it's something everybody knows, everybody feels, everybody knows this, every man knows this, if he hasn't suppressed his memories from boyhood, right? Unless he has been zombified by feminist society, he knows this. So there you have it. I'm really glad that Bruce Ryan put it down on paper like this. Now I'm gonna take an aside to the girls. Because this finding is really, it's really amusing. And it just turns it all upside down compared to what a normie would believe, right? Because if you're a normie, you think that sex is a poison. Like it poisons the minors. And if you ingest a poison, the more poison you get, the more poisoned you are, and you get harmed more if you have more of it. But in reality, for girls, rates of positive reactions increased from non-contact sex to sexual touching to sexual intercourse in both minor pair and minor older sex, with similar rates at each level of intimacy. And that is just so beautiful, because it tells us that sex itself cannot be doing the damage. Whatever negative reactions there are, it cannot be sex itself. Because then you should expect the ones who have the most intimate relations to have the most negative reactions. And it's not just the intimacy, but the frequency. Rates of negative reactions also go down when you have more frequent sex. For girls, rates of positive reactions were significantly higher for 11 or more times of intercourse compared to 1 time in both girl pair sex and girl older sex, with 2 to 10 times falling in between. So if you have sex with a girl more times, she is likely to be happier. Which flies in the face of feminist orthodoxy, right? But I will add here that I can't abuse this finding to claim that if you take any given girl and you have sex with her more times, she's gonna get happier. That's not how it works. It's the other way around. I mean, she's gonna let you have sex with her more times if she really likes you, right? So that's the selector here. But nonetheless, it proves that it's the quality of the relationship that determines how a girl will react to sex. It's not the age gap. The important thing is the quality of the relationship, not the age of the man or her partner. So that was just a little aside into girls, and I'm gonna go back to the female sex offender charade now about boys with older women. And now we are going to read Ryan's conclusion and his really forceful attack on feminism. This is really hardcore anti-feminism here. This is beautiful. I mean, just listen to this. First, a central tenet of the trauma view has been that minor older sexual experiences are an ordeal equally for girls and boys. Second, when empirical research does find substantial rates of positive reactions for boys, contradicting the ordeal view and differentiating boys markedly from girls, such findings have routinely been dismissed in the CSA field, for example, as artifacts of cognitive distortions based on pathological cultural indoctrination by their abuser. Yeah, that's the standard feminist propaganda that you just can't believe if you're intellectually honest. You have to look at the actual evidence. If you do that, it just doesn't make sense to claim that there's equality. on the first point, results from the present study suggest that it is empirically untenable to hold that boys and girls in the general population react similarly on average to minor older sex. The sex differences in reactions were significant and large, with boys much more likely to react positively than girls, and much less likely to react negatively. The odds of boys reacting positively at the time to minor older sex were more than 6 times girls' odds. Okay, 6 times the difference. And that includes homosexuality. If you just look at women, the difference is astronomically large. And yet, the feminists will have us believe that women deserve equal prison time for this victimless sex, right? They want to punish the women just as much for something that is comparatively not just nothing. I mean, it's positive. It's not it's not only victimless, it's good for the boys, as we are showing here. So let me now let Rind speak some more in his own words. The validity of the present results is further suggested by their comportment with what is scientifically known about gender differences in sexuality and norm non-compliance, beginning before puberty and extending through adolescence and beyond, as reviewed by Felsen et al. And summarized previously. Felsen et al. Predicted that boys would react more favorably to minor older and minor pair sex than girls because they, especially in adolescence but beginning prior to puberty, are generally more interested in sex for its own sake and less bothered by violating social norms than girls. Particularly to the point are sex differences in sexual fantasizing, which boys do at earlier ages with greater frequency, intensity, sexual explicitness, and positive feelings. This behavior is emergent, not taught, indicating a biological basis rooted in evolution. Broad trends in immature males' eagerness for sex across the primate order add to this evolutionary argument. In short, the evidence indicates that boys, especially at puberty and beyond, are particularly biologically prepared to react favorably to sexual behavior in certain contexts, which can include significantly older partners. The Finnish data confirm this, while substantially contradicting the practice in CSA research to use girls as the standard and deduce what must also be for boys. Earlier it was noted that, across the primate order, it is common for immature males in late juvenescence through early adolescence to eagerly attempt coitus with adult females, which a number of primatologists have attempted to explain with the needing to learn hypothesis, in which preferential targeting of adult females for coital practice is an efficient means to honing reproductive skills that will eventually adaptively serve them in a sexually competitive social environment in terms of enhancing reproductive success. Caution is needed in extrapolating from non-human primates to humans, but nevertheless, conservation of traits can be expected to obtain here even if new layers of behavioral predispositions, e.g. heightened responsiveness to cultural norms relative to biological inclinations, were overlaid during human evolution. From a norm point of view, it could be argued that in our society, boys do not need to learn about coitus from significantly older females because our culture provides other avenues for boys to learn what is needed. This social argument may be valid in terms of specifying how sex should operate in a modern complex society, but it does not negate the biological argument, i.e. conservation of traits. The evidence indicates that maturing boys are often prone to desire such relations regardless of the norms, which potentiates their willingness to engage in such relations, opportunity and context permitting. So there you have it. The desire is there. And then, okay, you can say you want to have a norm that says it shouldn't be there. And if you're a feminist and you're a killjoy and you're evil, in my opinion, then that's fine. You can have that opinion. But you cannot claim it doesn't exist, this desire in boys, that we all remember. We remember how wonderful it would have been to have sex with an older woman as a young boy. And from there follows the morality that I shall speak of now in my own words in the rest of this video. So, there you have the context that I'm wanting to provide right now. And I am calling it the female sex offender charade. When we pretend women are sex offenders for being extra nice, that is worse than just singling out people at random and persecuting them, like you might have done during any other witch hunt. And in my opinion, it's also worse than a hate crime. I mean, this is the worst kind of hate crime. You can call it a hate crime. It's the hate crime against sexuality that this society is perpetrating right now. The war on sex is a hate crime against sexuality. And when it affects women who are extra nice, who get labeled as the worst person you can be and punished accordingly for being extra nice, then you have the worst travesty ever. The worst miscarriage of justice ever is the female sex offender charade. How did we go so wrong? So spectacularly wrong. We are a society of zombies, discounting lived experience in favor of the algorithms that tell us something is abuse when it's wonderful. And we don't pay attention to reality. We just use the algorithms, or let the system use the algorithms, the laws the artificial intelligence gets to rule and overrule human emotions, human lived experience, everything that makes us human. And this goes on and on. Witch hunts can continue for hundreds of years. This one is now embedded in industrial civilization. It's entrenched. It's not looking like it can be dislodged without this whole society just getting past it by collapsing, right? That's what we need to hope for. But at least I'm speaking my mind. I'm speaking out. This is therapy for myself. I don't have an illusion of being able to change anything. But I can change my own feeling to manage my terror of living in this insane society. Right? At least I said something. I didn't go along with it. I wasn't a normie. I didn't accept the war on sex. It disturbs me profoundly. And the most profoundly disturbing part is the female sex offender charade. because sex is a female resource. Boys are lucky and girls are simply victimless. There's another dimension in the female sex offender charade. Beyond victimless crime. It's beyond victimless crime. It's the next level of persecution. Beyond a random persecution. We now have persecution of the nicest women. How can that be tolerated? How can there be no feminist movement against that? Why is the only one speaking out the men's movement? And the men's movement largely consists of me these days. Because we don't have a men's movement either. Just have a little sexualist movement that I helped create. And currently I'm the only face of it. There is the MAP movement, sure, that's nice. But they don't pay special attention to the female sex offender charade. I'm trying to talk sense into them too, but they don't see this as special. They don't recognize the extra level of persecution that goes into singling out the nicest women for a witch hunt. It's bad to persecute men too for victimless crimes, don't get me wrong. But there is an extra level of evil. When the contrast is so great as it is between the legal fiction of women sexually abusing lucky boys and the reality that we all feel, that's what you can't take away from us, the feeling. But apparently you can override it in the legal system. And that took away my faith in humanity, that they could actually override such a strong feeling. The most salient part of being a man, what masculinity consists of, that's now denied in these laws. And we don't have a significant movement against it. I am the only sexualist. So please, can't you see? Can't you see how uniquely bad that is? I mean, why do you put up with it? If you're a woman yourself, you don't have spine, you don't have moral integrity. You will not speak out against it. You're a sheep, a normie, a coward. Well, that's not really surprising me. But what's so disturbing is that more men are not doing it. At least men used to have some spine, didn't they? Men used to have moral convictions. Well, at least some did. Could have a movement. So help me grow the sexualist movement. It's sorely needed. Why is the sexualist movement not taking off? Why am I speaking to 38 followers when I'm the only one even speaking out against this? I'm the only one taking sexuality's side in a principled manner. I take sexuality's side in the war on sex. Like I did in the drug war, I took the side of drugs. And that turned out to be on the right side of history. Shortly thereafter. It's been 15 years since I thought that was a really important thing for me to be an activist for. And now I see so many doing it, and the mainstream catching up that the drug police were evil. So I can relax. I don't have to be an activist for that anymore. So these days, I only focus on sex. That's the witch hunt that I'm needed in. I'm needed to fight against it. I am needed. Even if most of the victims don't even consider it to be a war, they're so brainwashed, they think that they are perpetrators, they're sex offenders. And they don't see how insane that is. And even some women get labeled as sex offenders. And I'm their only spokesman. I'm the only one taking the side of sexuality in a systematic manner. How did we get to this point where humanity is allergic to itself? We don't tolerate ourselves anymore. We think sex is something evil, inherently evil, and we don't recognize the sex differences that everyone feels. We just, they're zombies if you don't feel it. So now the normie is a zombie. Supposed to be a zombie. Supposed to act like we don't have sexual feelings. Except in idealized conditions that don't exist. There is no sexual feeling. There is only sex offenses. We pretend that we need to punish these sex offenders. Whenever we shine a light on sexuality, there is always criminality. Every time. You can always apply a feminist sex law to everything to do with sex. Every single situation. Humanity has become allergic to itself. The most natural part of it is now criminal. Also the most enjoyable part, the most valuable parts of it are now criminal. We need a movement taking sexuality's side. That is my movement. The sexualist movement. We take sexuality's side against the persecution of sexuality. This persecution is so successful at the moment that people don't even realize there is a war going on, because they think this is just what we do. We persecute sexuality around here. We can't tolerate sexuality, supposedly because sexuality is evil. The metaphysical badness of sex is the religion of our times. To believe in that. And so you have the cream and acceptum, the witch hunt against sexuality. It is affecting me without being prosecuted just for living in this condition, right? I mean, usually you can get away with a lot of sex crimes, but it's still profoundly disturbing to watch the ones who get caught. So if I were idealistic, I would just shut up and break the sex laws like everybody else. and I bring attention to myself as an activist. I do that because I am idealistic, because I care, because it's worth fighting for, just for the principle of justice. It's worth fighting against this injustice, even if it hurts me and I end up being destroyed by the state eventually. I know what I'm doing. I know how dangerous it is. But I do it because it's right. I know I'll probably end up like Nathan Larson and all the others who were activists on sexuality's side. I'll be destroyed and killed, beaten down into, not into submission, but into death, like Nathan Larson. He was never beat into submission, he just committed suicide. See, they can destroy us, but they can't break our ideology, our conviction, our spirit. That's the most important thing. That's more important than living. You can't break my ego syntonicity. Ego syntonicity. It's a beautiful word, beautiful concept. And it's what activists have after losing everything else. We can have our ego syntonicity. No part of us shall break. No part of our, except our bodies, you can kill us. But you don't break our moral convictions. Our conviction that we are in the right. We have morality on our side. And the war against sex is evil. Society is evil. The normies are evil. Supporting the evil justice system. The evil cops. The evil war on sex. I shall never, ever appear as if I support that or got broken by it. Have my integrity. I am a sexualist. Let's talk about the female sex offender charade. I need to talk about this because nobody else is. Why is the female sex offender charade uniquely bad? That's something you probably don't understand. But I'm going to tell you why. It's because the contrast is greater than for anything else, any other witch hunt ever perpetrated. The contrast between legal fiction that these women are sexual abusers, and reality that they are nice to boys. That contrast has never been stronger in any other miscarriage of justice. Back when we had witch hunts last times, like the ones where witches were burnt, then you singled out some women for whatever reason. They were innocent victims, but they were also not singled out on the basis of being extra nice. But that's what's happening now. We're singling out the nicest women and giving them the equivalent to burning witches. I mean, the worst punishments you can have right now, these are given to sex offenders, right? So now we pretend women are sex offenders, and now they also get this draconian justice. And the contrast, that's what makes it so disturbing, because it's worse than rounding up victims at random. and punishing them. If you had a witch hunt by lottery, it would be less unjust than to have a witch hunt by the criteria of the female sex offender charade. And for some bizarre reason, I'm the only one who is morally outraged by this. I'm not the only one who can see that it's absurd, but I'm the only one who is really morally outraged. Above and beyond what moral outrage there is against victimless sex crimes in general. So this is important for me. If we had a feminist movement that were actually concerned with women's rights, they would have this as a major cause. They would fight against this. But they don't even recognize it. In fact, they're the ones who created the problem. They foisted this gender-neutral sex law idea on society. And that got installed as the algorithm in law. It's an algorithm. It's not human. The intelligence is artificial that enforces this. And it's using humans as cogs in that machinery to compute these verdicts. And everyone can see, or any sensible person can see, that the result is absurd. But we don't do anything, because there's no feedback. Unlike what happens if you're an engineer and you build a bridge and it collapses, then the feedback just hits you in the face and it's impossible not to see it. But when you punish people for nonsense, bullshit, gibberish reasons, like we do to women now for sex crimes, well, then they just rot in jail and nothing happens because there's no feedback mechanism to distinguish the innocent victims who are imprisoned because they're just victims of a mindless witch hunt, and the ones who are there because society has a legitimate need to protect itself against them. There is no legitimate need to protect society against women being sexually nice. This is happening. It's happening right now. And you're not disturbed by it? You're not outraged? I don't get it. I don't get how you can stand there and watch and not do anything, not be outraged, not want to do something. I mean, at least make some videos like this. At least like this video and subscribe. Do something. We can't tolerate this. It's important.